This week's Parshat VAYISHLACH, and it's a continuation of the story of Yaakov, the third of the Avos, of the forefathers. And before we start, I just want to explain something that I know many of you have heard very often. We have a saying that Masa Avos, that the actions of the forefathers, Siman Labonim, is a sign for the children. What that means, it's not just what it sounds like. It sounds like if your parents behave in a certain way, the children will follow suit. That may be true, but that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is that in very deep code, what happens to the Avos, to the forefathers, to Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and then later on to Yosef HaTzadik, is a blueprint of what's going to happen to every Jew's life in terms of his personal destiny with his personal tests. So it doesn't take a great deal of logic or imagination to understand that if we believe, and this is what we do believe, that the Torah is the wisdom of Hashem, and it was dictated to Moshe Rabbeinu on Mount Sinai, and Moshe Rabbeinu writes down what Hashem is dictating to him, which is Hashem's wisdom. And that's a relatively short document, which you can read in an hour and a half, depending on how quickly you read. And that is a document which represents the revealed wisdom of Hashem to Jews for every generation between the time of the giving of the Torah and the coming of Mashiach. So if you're going to have a document which reveals God's wisdom in all its unlimited, infinite capacity, where's there room for stories? I mean, how can you have stories about Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov? How can you have stories about whether Yitzchak fights with Esav or he doesn't fight with Esav? You don't have to be a genius to understand that those stories are code. They're code for what's going to happen to you and me. They're code for what our tests and challenges are going to be. And the way those problems are solved and the way those challenges are dealt with are signposts for how we have to deal with our challenges in our life if you want to be successful. So, Masa of a Siman Labonim is a very deep concept, and when you have stories in the Torah, you have to know that these stories are dynamite. These stories are nuclear reactors. They're not just a story. So when you come to Parshat VAYISHLACH, this week's Parsha, when you have a mad story, an apparently mad story, how much more so is this a red flag, or it should be a flag to anybody, to understand that they have to go on high alert, because what the story is doing is predicting and designing your life. So it becomes very important. So the story, and the story par excellence, to give an example of this, is related in this week's Parsha. So let's get the story together, everybody together. So l'chaim. Yaakov, Avram Avinu is the first Jew. The first Jew to be born with a neshama was Yitzchak, his son. The first neshama born from a neshama that was born was Yaakov. So Yaakov is really thought of in many ways as the cream of the three Avos. Avram is the emotion. He represents Chesed. Yitzhak represents Gevura, but Yaakov represents Tiferes, which means perfection. So, and let's start with the life of Yaakov. You think you've got problems. I think I've got problems. Yaakov, he's the fruit, the best, the absolute pinnacle of the voice. And look at his life. When he's a young man, he's a twin. He's bullied by his brother Esau. He finally all he wants to do is sit and learn. Esau keeps beating him and bashing him and cheating him, and then comes the whole story with the selling of the Bechor, of the birthright, and he goes into his father and has to apparently swindle his father for the brocha of the Bechor, and then his mother tells him he's got to run away because his brother's going to kill him. So he runs away to Haran. Haran was the Cabramatta of the Middle East, the absolute pits of everything terrible and bad, ugly and dirty. And there his father-in-law, he works for his father-in-law. His father-in-law does nothing but jip him and cheat him. He falls in love with Rachel. The father-in-law gives him Leah instead of Rachel. He has to work for Leah. Then he has to work for Rachel. Then his father-in-law cheats him with his salary, changes his pay 16 times. He then finally tries to run away, and when he's running away, he learns that on the way back to Eretz Yisrael, he's going to meet his brother. The brother's sworn to kill him, so the brother's traveling with 400 armed men. This is his life. And he doesn't have one day's peace. He doesn't have one day's nachas. And then when he meets his brother, just before he meets his brother, we have this story. So what's the story? The story is that Yaakov is running away from Lavan, his father-in-law, with his two wives, the two shivkas, mistress, concubine. It's a marriage, but a marriage without a ksuba. So he's got four wives, and it's children, and his wealth. He's very, very wealthy by now, and he's traveling towards his brother, and he comes to a river, and he gets everybody across the river safely, and then here starts the mad story. He goes back alone. First of all, why would you go back alone? It's dangerous, and he's got all his security around him. He goes back alone, and the Torah says that he goes back for some jars, some small jars. And nowhere is it suggested that those jars are of any value. The Gemara talks about this in Chulin, doesn't say anything about its value, but it says that he went back for these three jars. So the question is, Rashi asks, why? And the Gemara in Chulin answers that the possessions of tzaddikim are more important to them than their bodies. You hear this? And you say, are you serious? We learn from morning till night about spirituality and Gashmias and how Gashmias is secondary to Ruchnias, to spirituality. And now you're telling me that a tzaddik who is a saint without any Yetzer Hara. He's a person of total interdependence with his God. Shares a common consciousness with his God. And his possessions are more important to him than his body? How can you say that? Anyway, he goes back for the jars. When he goes back for the jars, we'll come back to all these pieces in the story in a minute. When he goes back for the jars, the malach of the angel of Esau, everybody has a guardian angel, for good and for bad. That's a whole different shir, and it's a whole complicated story. But you have a malach for your nefesh habahamis, and you have a malach for your nefesh halakis, for the more experienced. The malach of Esau, because Yaakov's coming to meet with Esau, and there's probably going to be a war, so he comes to look after Esau, to fight Yaakov. So we have this story that he goes back alone, he goes back for jars which have no value, and he's pounced on by this huge ogre of a person looking like a human being who wants to wrestle him to death, wrestle him to death. And it says that they wrestled all night until the morning came. And then the malach couldn't overcome Yaakov. But at the end, when he saw he couldn't overcome him and it was morning and it was time for him to go, he hit him or struck him in the thigh, and for that and damaged his gid anosha with some, what do you call it? Sciatic nerve. He damaged the sciatic nerve, and from then on Yaakov limped. And then, just before he leaves, he says, I'm leaving. And Yaakov says, you're not leaving until you give me a bracha. Right? I want to ask you something. You leave your car and you go to somewhere. You go somewhere and you're walking down a dark lane, and a guy's coming to beat the living daylights out of you with a knife in his teeth, right? And you fight him, and he doesn't. You ask him for a bracha. What does it mean? This enemy of yours is trying to kill you. You're asking him for a bracha, and he gives you a bracha. What's the bracha? He says, from now on, your name won't be Yaakov anymore. From now on, it'll be Israel. And we learn that Yaakov and Yisrael, every other time that Hashem changes somebody's name in Torah, the name, you're not allowed to use the previous name. Avram is changed to Avraham, and you're not allowed to, we don't use the word Avram unless we're teaching or learning Torah. But when you refer to Avraham, you have to refer to him with the name that Hashem gave him. Second, with Yitzhak and Yisrael, we've learned together many times that we have to, that both names were in use, and there's a reason for that, and the reason for that is that a Jew has two levels to his consciousness. One is his physical relationship with the world, putting out the garbage, going and earning a living, paying his taxes or not, trying to live a functioning, worthwhile physical existence. And that's him in his Yaakov mode. In his Yisrael mode, he's spiritual. He talks to his God. He davens. Forget about a siddur. I'm not talking about that. It's consciousness. He talks to God. He says to God, you do this, and I promise you I'll do that. Give me this and I'll fix that. Take this pain away and I'll give tzedakah, or I'll do this or I'll do that. But his mental communication is with his God. That's when he's in his Yisrael mode. And in his Yaakov mode, his communication is, what sort of petrol will I put in the car? Is it cheaper at this garage or cheaper at that garage? So it's two different perspectives. And we learn that both perspectives are totally legitimate. And that's how a Jew functions. And that's why he's got these two names. And that's the bracha that this malach, this angel of Esav, gives him, that he's got this extra name. What is this whole story about? I mean, and you're telling me that it's so important that it should take up a couple of pages of Torah, and that those precious words of Torah are destined to be a lesson for you and me for eternity. So we got to understand why. L'chaim. So there are a few things here. Let's start with the change of name, which came at the end, but let's start with that at the beginning. A very important question for a Jew to come to in his life, and he needs to come to this alone. You know, you need to go for a walk on Bondi Beach once, or somewhere in Centennial Park, wherever it is that you go, and ask yourself this question. The question is, who am I? Who am I really? Not the person that seeks validation from other people, not the person that's showing off, not the person that's trying to win the heart of some lady. Who are you really? And we have the answer to that a Jew is really Yaakov and Yisrael. We have both perspectives. And we need to understand each of those perspectives for ourselves. Doesn't matter for anybody else. Doesn't matter what your perspectives are. For me, it matters what are my perspectives. That doesn't mean I'm being selfish. It means that I have a duty to myself to understand why I'm functioning. What am I functioning for? Am I really going to be born and live 60, 70, 120 years, die, go to Rookwood, maybe have won the prize for the most money in your street, and for that you've lived and suffered and had pain and had heartbreak and had wonderful times and bar mitzvahs and simchas? Why? And when you do have, as you are spending your life, in which mode are you? Are you in your Yaakov mode, or are you in Yisrael mode? You know, there's a story with one of the Rebbes, I can't remember which one. He had a chassid, a big chassid, who was a very, very religious, deeply devout, good man. And he, this was in Russia, and he went to business. He was a very successful businessman. He went to business in Moscow. When he went to business in Moscow, he got dressed up in a suit and a tie and a short coat, and he looked modern, and he was very expensively dressed, and obviously he had a hat and everything that you required in halakha. He had tzitzis, but the tzitzis were covered. And when he was finished and he come back to Lubavitch, he went to see, always used to go to see his Rebbe, report on the business, and give tzedakah to the Rebbe so that the Rebbe could help the poor people in the community. So what is that? Cats?
Birds.
Birds at night. There's no birds at night. Huh? Maybe bats.
Birds.
Maybe bats. Anyway, so he comes to this river, and one day he's walking in. He comes back to the Lubavitch and he says, "You know what? When he went to the river, he always got changed. Got out of his suit, put on a kapota, put on a shtreimel before he went in to see the river, put on a gartel. And one day he goes in and he comes to the Lubavitch and he asks himself the question, you know, what am I doing really? I change clothes to impress the river. I mean, why don't I? He's my river. I'd show him what I do wear in Moscow. What I wear in Moscow is regular clothes. I'm a regular businessman. So he goes in his regular clothes for Yechidus, and the Rebbe looks at him, and the Chassid says to the Rebbe, I've decided I have to be true to myself and not to lie. And the Rebbe said, that's very admirable. He said, why am I broken-hearted? He said, I thought the real you was the one in the kapota, and the costume you put on to go to the false clothing you put on to go to Moscow. But now I learn that the real you is the one that's in Moscow, and the one that you come to me is to be dressed up. This is a very serious question for you and me, because what part of our lives do we spend really trying to be connected one-to-one to our God? We have a relationship with our God. And how much of our lives do we spend connected to Gashmis, to all the trivia of life, which is very important. Come back to that in a minute because of the jars. We'll see how important it is because of the jars. But how much of your life do you... And the issue isn't only the question of how much of your life is spent in one way or another, but because don't forget that the name Yisrael was added to the name Yaakov. So we learn out of this a very clear understanding that a Jew has got to be both. It's no good. A Jew can't be just Yisrael. That's also no good. He's got to be Yaakov. He's got to put out the garbage. He's got to go to work. Got to earn money, give tzedakah, look after his wife and children, give them an education, and he's doing all of that in his Yaakov mode. It's very important. And if you want to understand how important it is, it's important because, and we'll come to it in a minute, that you and I come into contact with Gashmias, with physicality, for a reason. We come into contact with physicality to elevate it. We don't come into it by accident. There are no accidents. We're going to see that in a minute. We've learned it a million times together. So if there are no accidents and you're coming into contact with physicality, it's intended that you deal with that physicality. That's part of our job. That's part of our responsibility. But what part of your life and what level of your concentration is on whether or not you're getting the best deal for your new tires? You've got to have new tires. You can't drive in a car that isn't safe. So you need to maximize the economy of getting the new tires. So you go and look it up in the internet and go and learn. You go to and see if you can get a deal, three tires for the price of 4 tires for the price of 3, whatever it is, and you spend half a day mucking around with it, and you have to drive the car there, and you have to wait, and you go in the waiting room, and you give you a coffee, but you don't know whether the coffee's kosher, and then it goes on and on and on until you get the 4 tires. Finally, you get the 4 tires, and you've wasted the day. Right? But you had to do it. No one's doing it for you. You have to do it. But in that time that you spent the day with the 4 tires instead of the 3 tires, for the price of the 3 tires, is there any part of that day where you are also Yisrael? And you have to ask yourself the question of which is more important. Is it more important for you to be Yaakov, or is it more important for you to be Yisrael? And obviously, everybody comes down to the understanding that it's more important to be Yisrael with Yaakov. But if you're going to be 99% Yaakov and 1% Yisrael, I'll share this with you. You're going to have you're not going to have a life. You know what you're going to have? An existence. To have a life, you need to have a substantial percentage of Yisrael. And it's substantial percentage of sharing a godly perspective, building a relationship with your God, davening to your God in however often you can. A guy can't start and he's davening 3 times a day from the siddur from beginning to end. It's ridiculous. But one mitzvah at a time, one conversation at a time, one interrelationship at a time with your God, to build a relationship, that's a whole different thing. And then, this is a secret of Hasidus that the Rebbeim have shared with us, that when a Jew is on a journey, and he's on a journey, last week said Vayetze. The word Vayetze means to go out on a journey. That's our job. That journey needs to be a journey where we are increasing the percentage of Yisrael and minimizing the percentage of Yaakov. Not minimizing it because it's less valuable, but because there's more to be achieved. And how do we do that? We do that by elevating the physical into the spiritual, which we come to in a minute. But that's a whole different life. If a person understands that he has to do this progressively, so let's say a guy starts off and he knows nothing. I'm not saying anyone, God forbid, knows nothing. But let's say somebody starts off and he doesn't know the 613 mitzvahs, he doesn't know how to daven, he doesn't. We once had a guy, Rabbi Leader gave the shir last week, right? I used to sit next to Rabbi Leader in yeshiva. We were very old friends. And I think I may have told you the shir. One day a guy comes in fringes and bare feet and long hair, and he was a very cute guy, and he sat on, I sat on the aisle, next to me was Leader, and on the other side of Leader was this guy. And Leader talked to him all through davening and encouraged him and made him feel comfortable, and he fell in love with yeshiva. He fell in love with Rabbi Leader and all these Jews who were so seriously keeping Yiddishkeit. Next week, I come to shul, or maybe it was 2-3 weeks later. He's in a kapota, black hat, haircut, starting to grow a beard. He's done the whole transformation in 2 weeks, you know. So Leader looked very upset. I said, "What's the matter?" He said, "He's very upset." I said, "Why?" He said, "It'll be gone in another 2 weeks." And that's exactly what happened. He was gone in another 2 weeks. My first teacher, for example, told me to take it very slowly, one mitzvah at a time. But once you take on a mitzvah, keep it until the next one that you're going to go, and never give it back, never. So he told me, you know how he told me to start? I used to shave in those days in the shower, and I loved it. I had a mirror in the shower, and the water was fresh, the blade was sharp, the nice foam, and I loved it. And he told me that that's one of the mitzvahs you're not allowed to do, to take a blade to your face. He told me to start shaving. He didn't tell me to grow a beard and payas. He told me to start shaving with an electric razor. And so that's what I did. And I never took a blade to my face again. That was my first mitzvah. And that's this concept. This concept is that we are born and live in Yaakov mode, and our destiny, if you want fulfillment and happiness and flowering and growth, is to keep adding to that a dimension of Israel, more and more and more, slowly, nothing in a mad rush, but slowly, slowly, so that when it comes time to take your trip to Rookwood, you're 95% Israel. You're already talking to your God. Okay, l'chaim. So what about these jars? Yaakov has taken his whole family, kept them safe, taken them across the Yabok river, whatever it's called. And now he comes back alone. By the way, his sons are criticized for letting him go back alone. Who lets their father go back alone? But the fact that he went back alone is code. Why is that code? Because you'll see that he regretted that he left the jars. And when you and I have a sincere regret, where we really want to do tshuva, you have to be alone. You don't do that in public. You don't boast about it. You don't talk about it. You don't tell somebody that yesterday I did this and now I've done tshuva. No, that's not tshuva. Tshuva's quiet. Tshuva's alone. You'd have to do that alone. Now, what did he come back for these jars for? So let's revise together the concept of Hashgacha Pratis, concept of divine providence.
Where were the jars?
Where were the what?
Jars.
On the other side of the river. He left them behind by mistake. So what was the big deal about the jars? So we have this Gemara in Chulin that I told you, that the Gemara says that a tzaddik values his possessions more than his body. And every commentator screams at that. What does that mean? So the Rebbe, our Rebbeim in Chabad, explain what it means. I'm going to try and summarize it for you. It means this, that before I can even explain it, we have to put a couple of building blocks that everybody's aware of, I'm sure. Let's put them back into place. We believe in God. We believe that Hashem created heaven and earth, the world. All of Gashmias is a creation. We believe that creation didn't happen once historically, and that God walked away and pressed a button on automatic, and that the world just goes where it goes. That's the belief system of many religions. That's not our belief system. Our belief system is that God is recreating everything every micro moment. What does that mean? It means that if you throw a ball, let's take the example of the ball. If you throw a ball, the ball's default position is not flying through the air. The ball's default position is lying stationary on the ground. In order to change that default position, you have to energize it. And if the energy is diminished, as the energy diminishes, the ball flies less and less and less until it finally stops. Right? Kabbalah and Hasidus explains that the default position with the world is that it doesn't exist. Yet, Bria yesh ma'ayin. Yesh ma'ayin means something out of nothing. It doesn't mean something from a cause. It's something out of nothing. If there's no physical anything, nothing, then to energize that something that energy has to be ongoing. Otherwise it'll disappear. There'll be nothing again. The ball will stop rolling eventually and stop still because there's no energy energizing its movement. If there's nothing energizing the world, it will cease to exist. Now, is that true of continents and seas and oceans and clouds and countries? Yes, sure. Is it true of elephants and giraffes? And sure. But if you think about it for a moment, if it's also going to be true of each tooth. It's going to be true of each hair on your head. It's going to be true of each toenail, which is growing whether you're concentrating on it or not. And if Hashem is bringing into existence all of creation, it then follows as a matter of absolute logic that he must be controlling it. Otherwise, you can't be energizing something without controlling it. If he's bringing it into existence, it means he's controlling it. Each hair, each toenail, each eyelash, otherwise it wouldn't exist. If he's controlling it, it means, now you go to the next logical step, which is absolute. It means that if something happens to you, it's orchestrated. What's hard about that? If Hashem is creating everything every moment and he's controlling everything and something happens to you and you and I meet tonight, we're meeting for a reason. You're coming to learn a shir, it's for a reason. The availability of the shir has been made possible for you, especially for you. Otherwise, how would you have it? When you eat something, when you fall over, when you trip, when you have an accident, it's all orchestrated. Does that mean you have no choice? It doesn't mean you have no choice, but it does mean you have no choice as to what happens to you, and you have absolute freedom of choice as to how you react to it, right? That you have freedom of choice, but what happens to you, when you were born, what country you were born in, whether you grow up to be tall or short, fat or skinny, healthy or not. Are you telling me they're choices? They're not choices. I was at university, I'm fond of telling you this, that I was at university with a guy in law school. He was Olympic fit. And he dropped dead at 41 in Bondi Junction. You probably were here already when that happened. Dropped dead, heart attack, 41 years of age. My father-in-law lived to be 97. You know what his diet was? I've told you. He had cake for breakfast, cake for lunch, and cake for dinner. And in between, he went into the coffee shop and he ate those packets of sugar. You poured them, those packets of sugar, tear off the top and pour it into his mouth. That was his diet. He lived to be 97.
What was the cake?
I don't know. It's not horror cake.
I know him very well.
Huh? You knew him well.
Yeah.
I used to work with him.
Yeah.
Inside.
Yeah. Lovely man. He was a tzaddik.
Unbelievable.
Tzaddik, yeah.
Yes.
So let's go back. Everything that happens to you is happening to you by divine providence. How you react to it, that's the whole game of being alive. And we have a statement, I've said this many times to you, but it's worth it for the shir, and I know there are people that listen to the shir who may not know this, that whatever happens to you which is deliberate is happening to you for your benefit. Otherwise, when somebody breaks a leg, you've got to then say, if it's not for his benefit, God's the sadist. Why is he giving you pain? How can God give you pain? He can only give you pain if the purpose of that pain is for your benefit. There has to be a bigger benefit than the pain. Otherwise, he's a sadist. given that he's creating everything and he's recreating everything every moment, and everything is a matter of hashgacha pratis, and everything's happening to you for a reason. If that what is happening to you is not for your benefit, he's cruel. And that is an impossible statement in our belief system. So that being the case, everything that happens to you, once you put on your Yisrael perspective as opposed to your Yaakov perspective, that you now have to change the tires, and your Yaakov perspective is trying to get 4 tires for the price of 3, and you'll spend all day doing it. Another perspective is, why am I being bothered with this? What's happening? Now, often it's not possible for you and me to solve it. Often, in the days before Gimel Tammuz, we had a problem. Simple. We wrote into the Rebbe and asked the answer. Sometimes we got an answer, sometimes we didn't. When we got an answer, there was nothing more to talk about. You love Rabbi Feldman, right? I love Rabbi Feldman. He one day had a fantastic thing happen. George Saunders, do you remember him? George Saunders was a multi-millionaire who was a partner of Lowy in Westfield.
Yeah,
So
that's
he
surprising.
came to Feldman one day and he said, you know what, I've had a fantastic idea. You see this building here, this yeshiva building next door to the shul? He said, I'm going to take that and I'm going to build a Holocaust museum. And I'll pay for it. Top to bottom, I'll pay for it in every way. And all the schools can come, and the schools will pay an entry fee, and the entry fee will all go to yeshiva. I don't want anything out of it. I'm doing it as a mitzvah for yeshiva. And you, Rabbi Feldman, have terrible trouble finding money. You're always having to fundraise. It stops you giving classes. It stops you davening and this will be the end of your financial troubles. And Rabbi Feldman, and I spent a lot of time with him in those days, and I was in his office. He was so happy, I can't tell you. He was so overjoyed, right? So, of course, he wrote into the Rebbe for a bracha, and he gets an answer straight away. Ein kedai. It's not appropriate. Why? Because we don't make money from the Kedoshim. Right? Now, I want to tell you something. Do you think that Rabbi Feldman wrote back and argued? Do you think that he questioned the Rebbe's answer? He didn't question it. It was finished. Was he disappointed? You have to ask him. But it was finished. Over. It's harder now after Gimel Tammuz. But many people, many old, very wise people in Chabad say that why is it finished? Because you don't need it anymore. Our generation doesn't need it anymore. Anyway, I don't want to get into that, but what I'm saying is that, let me share another thing with you just before we come to the conclusion of this aspect. The Tzemach Tzedek in a volume called Derek Mitzvosecha says that the only reason, now I've said this many times because it's so important that people understand it, the only reason, not one of the reasons, not the most important reason, the only reason that a neshama is sent down into a guf, into a body, is for nisyonos, is for challenges. That's the only reason you're born. What challenges are you going to get, and what challenges am I going to get? The exact ones we need. The exact ones we need. And it's going to be different for everybody. Hashem has a cocktail nebach for everybody. For one guy it's money, for one guy it's health, one guy it's snackers from children. So, when a tzaddik gets an item of Gashmias, he doesn't get the 4 tires for the price of 3 just to get the 4 tires for the price of 3. He understands that those 4 tires are coming to him by divine providence. And there's a job to do with them. They've got to be elevated. How? I'm not a tzaddik, I can't answer you. In the old days, we used to write into the Rebbe, and maybe you'd get an answer. But a Jew's duty is to try and pursue the perspective that what he has physically for a reason, and that and to do good with it, whatever level of good that is. Maybe you're going to drive children around maybe you're going to take little old ladies to the hospital. Maybe you need the car for other tzedakah. But you need to understand, just as it's important to buy the 4 tithes for the price of 3, that's your Yaakov mode, but at the same time to understand that you are in the position of having to get 4 tithes for a reason. And whether you understand what that reason is yet, or it may take 5 years to find out that reason. I have an acquaintance. He did something beautiful. I used to learn with him for years. He did something beautiful. He wanted to buy. He loved Jaguars. He wanted to buy a Jaguar, but all his friends were poor. This was a friend of my father-in-law. All his friends were poor, so he decided to buy a Holden, a second-hand Holden, and he could afford the Jaguar. And he didn't buy the Jaguar because he didn't want his friends to be miserable or jealous. And we learned 3 years later that Jaguar was completely, totally, what do you call it, written off by the insurance company. It was in an accident and it's totally written off. Who knows? You don't know what your tests are necessarily. One of the things we need to do is to understand that there are 2 conversations going on. There's a Yaakov conversation going on and a Yisrael conversation going on. And you and I have a better chance to a better life by building the Yisrael conversation. So when he went back to get the 3 jars, it's because he understood that those jars were given to him by Hashgacha Pratis. There had to be a reason for it, and he has no right to leave them behind. How can he leave them behind? If they're so important to his life, does he know why they are? I don't know. It doesn't say. It was Yaakov Avinu, so maybe he did know. But he went back for the thing, and as a result of that, exposed himself to the risk of Esav's malach. So let's talk about Esav's malach. Let's talk about Esav's malach. So he fights with him all night. And in the morning, when he separates from him, he gives him this problem with his thigh. And because of that, we don't eat the sciatic nerve. So it's explained in Kabbalah and Chassidus that this part of the story is this. This is the code. That Am Yisrael High, we survive. But it isn't easy. We have to wrestle with Esav. Now, you have to understand that there are three basic lines of humanity. There's the Ishmael line, which is the Arabs, and we haven't got time to go through this, but it's an Arab source, and that ends up including Chinese and Africans and so on. And then there is Esav, which is Rome, Christians, European non-Jews, etc. And Eskimos, and we have a halacha that Esav sinner Yaakov, that Esav hates Yaakov. Now what does it mean we have a halakha? It means that a halakha is an inviolate rule of law, unviolatable. No non-Jew can really love a Yid the way a Yid can love a Yid. That's a fact. Now that sounds very difficult in our society where we search for egalitarianism, we search for people even want to have the same sex, the same gender, they want to be the same in every way. That's not true. It's not true in Judaism, it's not true in our belief system. Doesn't mean we're better or worse. A hand isn't better than a foot isn't better than a hand, but they're different. And Esav hates Yaakov. Now, why does Esav hate Yaakov? We haven't got time for it, but I'll just sketch it in for those who've been over this territory before, so it's in place for you. What's the cause of anti-Semitism? Anti-Semitism is a virus. It's a virus that needs to exist in order for there to be free choice. When Hashem chose us at Har Sinai to elevate the physical into the spiritual and bring the spiritual down into the physical, which is our mission in life as Yidden, as Jews, to elevate Gashmias. So that job was seen to be superior. That's a mistake, but it was seen to be superior. And therefore, immediately there has to be a corresponding reality. That's a positive, so there has to be a corresponding negative reality. And as that, we have anti-Semitism, and we've had anti-Semitism from the day the Torah was given, and we'll have it until Mashiach comes, and it'll be, if you can break your head on the wall and try and find all the reasons that you like, that it has to do with, we have more money, we have not enough money, we have political, we're communists, we're socialists, we're capitalists, we're whatever reasons they give, those reasons change and get morphed into, when they're shown to be rubbish, it gets morphed into a new thing. So at the moment, Jews are this is the most incredible of all history. Even after Hitler, at least with Hitler, he had this stupid idea of a race. But the latest one is the best of all, that we're violating human rights. Jews are violating human rights. It's just so.
They invented human rights.
So yeah, that's right. So the
You have to be human first.
I was explaining why they were fighting all night. They're fighting all night because Esav has to hate Yaakov, and they fight with us. In every generation, you say it at the Pesach Seder, in every generation that they try to kill us, they try to annihilate, they burn us, and they Holocaust us, and we survive, but we limp. You have to know, we limp. It has its effect. And Jews, instead of feeling fully conscious of their destiny, you know, if you look a bit too Jewish, maybe you feel a bit uncomfortable with a goy, you know. I was in my office. There was the Don was there one day, and there was another Yid there, not religious, and the Don was walking past the reception desk, and his tzitzis were showing, and this Jew said to him, "Rabbi, your tzitzis is showing," and he was embarrassed in front of the girls, in front of the non-Jews in the office. And the Don looks at him and said, "So what? So it's a matter of, but we limp. This guy's was ashamed that they should see the Don Sitzes. We've got nothing to, so but with the limp, I'm Yisrael High. At the end of the day, who wins? Yaakov wins, not Esau wins. Yaakov wins. And then you and I, when we live our lives, and we live in our Yaakov and Yisrael mode, who wins? The answer is you need both. You need Yaakov to elevate your Gashmias and deal with all your tests, and your tests which are particular to you and my tests which are particular to me. We need to deal with those in our Yaakov mode, buy the 4 tires for the price of 3. But at the same time, we need to develop and build our Yisrael mode, our Yisrael perspective, that life is about much, much more than just buying tires as cheaply as you can. It's about why you have tires. It's about what you're doing with them. It's about how you treat the man in the shop when you're buying the tires. All the subcategories of that, and they need your and my focus. And it needs, you can't do it overnight. You don't go to bed one night only Yaakov and wake up in the next day only Yisrael, like this guy in Shul who came in long hair and beads and bare feet one week and a kapara the next week. Can't do that. But if your resolution is that from one Rosh Hashanah to the next, that you're going to try and slowly but surely add in the Torah that you learn and the mitzvahs that you do, and slowly but surely do that, your life changes from existence to living. That's the reality. So guys, what are we waiting for? L'chaim, l'chaim.
Amen.